All right. Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. My name is Shaylin Stimson, and I'm the events manager here at Tech Manitoba. Thank you so much for joining us today for our tech mashup on fraud prevention in e-commerce. So just to start off, in spirit of reconciliation, I would like to acknowledge that Tech Manitoba is located in Winnipeg on the ancestral lands of Treaty 1 territory. This is the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Innuak, Anishinaabeg, Dakota, and Dene, and on the homeland of the Red River Métis. Tech Manitoba continually seeks to cultivate better relationships with Indigenous peoples and communities in spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. We seek to make Manitoba's tech sector the most diverse, equitable, and inclusive in Canada. So I know you're here today to learn about fraud, but real quick, I want to go over some of our upcoming events. So we just posted our next tech mashup, which will be on Tuesday, June 11th. This one is going to be on streamlining success, navigating process optimization and automation. This one's going to be in person, which is super exciting, and we're taking it on the road. So we're actually going to be in Brandon at their Fire Hall venue. We were there last June, if you were able to join us then, and we are planning to return. So it's going to be 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. If you are interested in attending and can't make it to Brandon, I am looking at doing potentially a hybrid version as well, so we can meet you on Remo. But we'll be joined by Focus Forward, who's going to delve into the world of process optimization through automation. So unraveling the essence of automation and embracing change management. This event is a gateway to future efficiency and innovation. The other event I want to bring up is next week on Wednesday on Remo, Manitoba Women in Tech. I'm hosting an event with Susan Coos. So she is going to talk about supercharging your well-being with happiness-focused strengths. So she is a positive psychology and personal development expert. She'll delve into the profound connection between strengths activation, happiness, and success. And then we have an event that is for our members only. So pretty much anybody who's sort of the lead in the company with the Tech Manitoba membership, we're going to go over how to take full advantage of your membership, make sure you're getting your money's worth, essentially, the different opportunities we have and the different benefits you get from being a member. So you can sign up to join us for that as well. And then one of our partners, CME, is doing a Dare to Compete conference. So this year, Canadian manufacturers and exporters are hosting an annual conference putting a spotlight on technology. So they're going to talk about a world where innovation meets practicality, and this event is going to bring together stories of manufacturers who have changed their industries with technology. So until the end of today, they're giving our members a $200 discount on a conference ticket. So you just need to email our membership address and we will give you the promo code for that. It's coming up on June 4th from 8 to 5 is the full conference. So you will see links to all these events just over in the chat. And now to the main event. So today we're joined by SkipTheDishes Fraud Squad. So I have Cassandra Swan, Beatrice Cornejo, and Ghazal Chana all joining me. They all have really impressive bios. So while they're hopping on stage here, I'm just going to go over that with you. Cassandra Swan is a product manager for customer app at Skip and is looking after payments and fraud. So in her 3+ years she's been in the role, she's implemented changes that have cut chargeback costs in half and continues to play a crucial role in balancing payment fraud with customer conversion. Prior to transitioning to product, Cassandra worked in the data analytics and has a background in engineering. Beatrice Cornejo is a fraud investigator at SkipTheDishes, focusing on customer and employee activity. So in the 5+ years she has been in the role, she has helped detect fraud trends that affect Skip as an e-commerce and helped implement solutions to reduce fraudulent orders. She also focuses on detecting and understanding false positives to reduce the amount of customer contacts to customer service support. And Gaza Chayana is a global fraud operations analyst at JET. She specializes in policy abuse detection and prevention. In her role, she is implemented proactive strategies to mitigate fraud risks, ensuring the security of the platform while optimizing customer service experience. With a background in data science and analytics and a strong analytical mindset, Guzzle leverages advanced technologies to identify emerging fraud trends and develop effective countermeasures. Her contributions have played a vital role in safeguarding Jet against fraudulent activities, underscoring her commitment to maintaining the integrity of the platform. So please help me welcome Cassandra, Beatrice, and Guzzle. Okay.
Okay, I think that I am now sharing my screen and that people can see that.
Yes,
Thanks, Shaylin, for the introduction. So we're going to be presenting on some high-level insights on fraud and fraud management best practices. As a brief intro onto what to expect, we're planning to walk you through the full life cycle of an order and all the places where fraud can sneak in. We're going to touch on both real fraud as well as friendly fraud as concepts and how you can identify a false positive. So as mentioned, I'm Cassandra. I'll be providing some more context and kind of setting the stage and then covering off everything about payment fraud. And then next we'll have Guzzle talk about account takeovers and the beast that is refund fraud. And then Beatrice will end us off by covering promotion abuse and discussing what happens if you accidentally blocked a good customer. So for some context, this is our general happy path for an order at Skip. Because Skip is a three-sided marketplace, we deal with customers, restaurant partners, and couriers, and Skip works as a mediary between them. And we require customers to have an account on our platform in order to place orders, and then they place their orders, and once they pay for it, we pass it off to the restaurant, and then the restaurant tells us how long until it will be ready, and we arrange to have a courier arrive there at the correct time to pick up the order and drop it off at the customer's door. So it's pretty straightforward, but this is a high-level indication of all the spots that a fraudster can attack within our happy path flow, and we, of course, see fraud across all three of our stakeholders. But for the rest of this presentation, we're going to be focusing exclusively on customer fraud. But I wanted to really drive in that fraud can happen anywhere, not just customers commit fraud. And we do have like restaurant partners that do money laundering and, of course, couriers that steal food. So the four types of customer fraud we're going to discuss in this presentation are payment fraud, or sometimes called transaction abuse, with generally coming back as chargebacks, and these can get a business in a lot of trouble with card issuers if you're not taking it seriously. Visa has their program called the Visa Fraud Monitoring Program, and they will fine you or stop accepting your payments altogether if you pass a certain number of chargebacks. And account abuse or account fraud is what most people know as account takeovers. And these are like the result of compromised login details, and this can be really bad for a business's reputation and can also lead to chargebacks and more payment fraud. And then promotion abuse is a type of friendly fraud that involves vouchers or promotions that a user does not qualify for. So it's someone who is finding a way to use a voucher that is not intended for them. And obviously, if this is happening, you can basically throw out your entire marketing budget and have no return on investment and not gain the new customers you're hoping to gain. And then refund abuse is a type of friendly fraud. I like to call it policy abuse, where customers are frequently missing items and they're lying to us and try to get free food. And these can be very expensive and very hard to identify. But just to take a step back and try to look at why do e-commerce companies even experience fraud? I like to think of there being three general types of fraudster. So the one I think most people think of automatically when they think of fraud is the organized criminal. And so these are the people that are using stolen credit card details. They're doing phishing schemes to try to steal all your information to log into your account. They have forums on the dark web where they find all this information and they all communicate with one another. And we're actually now seeing fraud as a service evolve, where working as a fraudster is their full-time job. They apply for positions, they work with this, they get hired into a team of specialized people who all look into specific things. And they are very good at masking their identities. They're using advanced tools to do like device tampering to mask their device identities. They're using like scripts and bots to make tons of new accounts and aging them up to look like real accounts for a little bit so that they can commit fraud on them later. Like they're pretty intense, and they're always finding new ways to get around things. And e-commerce businesses are great targets for these people because they can quickly convert their stolen card information into a physical good that they can resell later. And this scheme is called triangulation fraud if you want to look into it more. But basically, they have a real customer that they're communicating with, and they're using Skip as an in-between to, I guess, deliver the item to the customer that the customer is paying the fraudster for, and the fraudster is using a stolen card, and they pocket the entire difference. And then the next level is what I'm going to call the business scammer. And these are people that they know that fraud is bad, but they don't really care, because the only person getting hurt when they're committing fraud is this big corporation. And so like they know that like businesses have fraud prevention in place, and they know how to use more basic tools like VPNs and phone like services. And their motivation is getting free food. And these folks can be the hardest to identify because they kind of skirt the line between the organized criminal and our next category, which I call the life hackers. And these are people who genuinely don't know that they're committing fraud. They think that they just found some sort of life hack that is letting them do something that gets them a really good deal. They're not doing anything crazy. They're not like tampering with the app to try to make it do something specific. They just found usually a genuine bug, and they are just going to keep abusing it because it's working for them. And their motivation is just getting a good deal. I think a good example of this one is when you go online to a website and you're on the checkout page and you see a little spot for enter like a coupon code, and you go like use like a browser add-on, or you Google like coupon codes for the website name and try a bunch of them. That's promotion abuse, and that is what I would consider a life hack. But kind of moving more into payment fraud, the most obvious way to realize that you have an issue with payment fraud is also very expensive, because you will notice a bunch of chargebacks. And the issue with chargebacks as an indicator of fraud is that they're a lagging metric, and they can be filed up to 3 months after your payment was processed. And obviously noticing that you had a fraud attack 3 months later means that you're about to pay for fraud for the next 3 months, and is not a very great indicator of being able to do something about it. It's kind of like noticing the problem too late. And like the only way you're ever going to have zero chargebacks is if you accept zero orders. Like it's impossible for you to have absolutely none. But a good indicator if you have a problem is if you're hovering near the Visa Fraud Monitoring Program threshold, which is 0.65% of your payment volume. So if you're hovering around this, you will be contacted by Visa, and Visa will give you a warning. There's no issues right away. There's like a temporary period where you have 4 months to kind of get your fraud back in check. But this is kind of like the indication to the industry that you're probably accepting too many fraud payments and that you should do something about it. Similarly, you could track your early fraud warnings. So Visa calls these TC40s and MasterCard calls them safe reports. But these are early notifications that banks pass along to merchants as soon as a cardholder first claims that they found an unknown charge on their account. So they can come in before a formal chargeback, there's still a lagging metric. They still rely on a card holder to actually look at their credit card statement and notice, hey, I don't remember making that payment, and contact their bank. So it may be a little bit faster than 3 months later, but not by a lot. Probably a more proactive way to try to monitor for payment fraud is to monitor your payment volume. Like in general, as a merchant, you know what your normal volume split is, you know what your split of payment methods are, you know what your split of like how many payments are coming from each bank and so on. So you can monitor for this and look for changes in the ratio. And this doesn't always mean that you're seeing more fraud. You could have just had a super successful marketing campaign or something, but it's enough of an early indicator to look more closely at the transactions and accounts, which kind of leads into the next three that I'm going to mention, which are all having to do at an account level, what is going on. And I'm going to stress that looking at velocities is the most important thing that you can do when trying to stop fraud. So with our first one here, a normal Skip customer places an order maybe a couple of times a week, if even that. So when you find an account that is making multiple orders in the same day, it's pretty suspicious. And even more so, the order values are abnormal, because if they're super low value orders, that's an indication of card testing. Or if you're seeing a bunch of really low ones followed by a really high one, that's them now placing their very expensive orders that are going to result in very expensive chargebacks. And then sort of along the same line, there is a count of how many cards that a customer has on file. And a normal person maybe has a couple of credit cards, but almost never is someone going to have the exact same credit card multiple times. Like you're going to have, I don't know, a Visa Infinite and like a Visa Classic and a MasterCard. You're not going to have like 6 of the exact same credit card. That would be very abnormal. And so you can check to see like what type of cards these all are, and if it makes sense for the customer to have all of those cards. And especially if they're all the exact same VIN number, this is very suspicious, because when credit card details are leaked online or bought by fraudsters on the dark web, they're usually provided in an ordered list. So they're going to get a chunk of cards that are all very similar. And obviously, if you see a bunch of card numbers that are all very similar, it's probably a fake account using stolen card details. And then finally, you can kind of tell by looking at an account if it's fake. These will have like gibberish fake looking emails or super fake looking phone numbers. Or you'll see a bunch of accounts that all look like they were procedurally generated, which would be an indicative of some sort of script running to like make a bunch of emails of fake first name, fake last name, number. Like they look real, but they're not real. And then finally, if you want to look to see if you're seeing triangulation fraud, you can look at where the orders are being placed to, because a big indicator of triangulation fraud is every single order will be placed to a different address all across the country. There's no consistency. There's no like home address being listed. It's literally one order in like Calgary and then the next one in Toronto. Like you're not traveling across the country and ordering that frequently. And then I guess the last thing I wanted to point on here is that account takeovers can often look like payment fraud, but the big difference between how you can tell if an account was the result of an ATO is that an ATO account will have a normal order history prior to seeing all of these velocity changes, whereas just a credit card fraud account will be an account created for the sole purpose of committing fraud, so it won't have like a normal looking order history. But now you've noticed that you have a problem with payment fraud, and how can you stop it? And one way that can be quite effective is using standard payment authentication methods, which would be like address verification, which is like collecting the billing address when you're asking for credit card details, or getting the CVV, which is just the number on the back of the card. or using 3DS, which I'll talk about more in a moment. And these can effectively pass the fraud checking responsibility from the merchant over to the card issuer or the bank. And they can work in your favor because you can choose to either reject payments based on the actions of them. And if you're going to respond back to disputes after they've been filed, you can reference these checks as you doing your due diligence, and they may help you win back some money. My next one here is using machine learning and AI, because these have a huge opportunity in the fraud prevention space, where machine learning can be used to score the riskiness of a transaction. This comes back to all this velocity tracking, but the ML will be trained on what normal behavior is, and it can score the riskiness of a transaction based on how far from normal the behavior is. And also it'll take into consideration your historical chargebacks and be like, well, this order resulted in a chargeback, and this other order now has very similar behavior to that one. This one might be pretty high risk. And then along the same lines, I've listed behavior analysis. And this is kind of similar to the machine learning, but I wanted to separate it out to really highlight how session data can be used to monitor how suspicious a specific customer is. A normal customer will spend I don't know, a couple of minutes building their order. A fraudster is going to go through and click through all these pages really quickly. They're not going to have very much time. They don't really care what they're ordering. They're probably going to order a bunch of, I don't know, whiskey bottles in bulk. It's not going to look like a normal person. And then most importantly, a regular person types in their credit card number on checkout. A fraudster copy pastes it because they have an entire CSV list of stolen card details that they're going to go copy and paste in to see which one works. So if you're able to track the session data, you can then look for these behaviors and build custom rules to specifically block things that you know are almost always fraud. And then if all of this stuff sounds cool, but you don't have the capacity to care about this stuff, there are third-party services out there that specialize in fraud prevention. You can integrate with one and they will do the ML for you. They will have the rule engine. A lot of them also look across all of their different merchant volumes so that you can benefit from the trends that your competition or similar markets are seeing, and kind of build together a holistic view of what fraud looks like. And then finally, there's block lists. You can, if you know that a specific address sees a lot of fraud, you can block that address. The issue that I have with block lists is that they're short-term temporary fixes. They don't fix the actual problem of what is going on. And fraudsters are smart. They're going to find out what you're blocking, and they're going to start ordering to their neighbor's house. It can work to stop the bleeding, but it's not going to fix the problem. You have to identify the actual behavior. And then I had mentioned 3DS, and I wanted to expand on this because it's not used very often in Canada. It stands for 3 domain secure, where the domains are customers, card issuers, and merchants. And it was designed to be a way to protect everyone against fraud. It came out in the early 2000s and was modernized in 2020 with version 2.0. And all it is a 2FA flow. But the key difference between regular 2FA flows is that this is being done based on the contact information that the card issuer has for the card holder, not the contact information that the merchant has for the customer. And this is important because people are more likely to use their real phone numbers and emails with their bank than they are for a random e-commerce site. For example, I have what I call my spam email, which I use to sign up exclusively for online shopping. I'm not going to use my actual contact information for that. I am going to use a separate spot so that I don't get a bunch of spam emails afterwards. So this is very beneficial because we don't know this information, but now we can verify that the actual person using this card is indeed the card holder. And how it works is the merchant requests to authenticate with 3DS, and the bank will decide based on the information we've given them about the transaction if they want to force the customer through a 2FA challenge or allow it through the frictionless path. And regardless of which path the transaction takes, if the transaction is successful, the merchant gains a liability shift for any fraud claims, which means that the merchant does not need to pay if a chargeback comes in on this transaction. And well, that sounds super great. If there's a chargeback on it, it does still count towards your Visa fraud monitoring program ratio, where it's technically still fraud. It's not like just a free pass, like you don't have to pay for it, but it's still you accepting fraud. And of course, it also comes with a much higher processing fee. So it's worth being a tool in your tool belt, but maybe not like your full-on bulletproof vest. And then next up, we're going to have Guzzle, who is going to take you through some account fraud, which again, can come back as chargebacks, but is distinctly different.
Thank you, Cass, for that superb talk. Payment fraud definitely does keep us on our toes. So now let's switch gears from dollars to data as we delve into another thrilling chapter of this fraud saga, account fraud. Now, what is account fraud? Account fraud is when unauthorized individuals gain access to a user's account and then they misuse it for fraudulent activities, such as placing unauthorized orders or accessing sensitive information. Now, this can have serious consequences for both our customers as well as our businesses, including financial losses, reputation damage, and legal implications. So, moving on to this slide, we will discuss how we identify and combat account fraud. To effectively combat account fraud, we need to be vigilant in analyzing and identifying these various scenarios that are up on your screen. It could be a combination of one or two or even all of them. So not one of them is just going to tell you that this is account fraud. You could use a combination of these to identify this is actually account fraud. So what are the red flags? What are the things that we should look out for? These are the things that we should really look out for. First thing being different login details. So paying attention to instances where login details such as the device used or the IP address being used are inconsistent with the user's previous history. Another thing that you could look out for is a new delivery address. Again, be alert to orders that are being delivered to addresses that are new and seem to be in a different city or seem to be in a different province altogether, which, again, alone, it does not signify that this is account fraud. But along with a couple of these, it might signify account fraud. The third thing that you could look out for is changes in account information. Now, once a fraudster has actually gained access to someone else's account, they wouldn't want to let that go. To make sure that the original user cannot access their account, they might make some changes to personal details such as email addresses, phone numbers, names, which may indicate an attempt to hijack the account. Another red flag is high amount of orders in a short period of time. If there's unusually high order volumes being placed within a very short time frame, this could be a sign of fraudulent activity. For example, someone's placing 10 orders in a 2 hour window. That's definitely a big waving red flag. Um, Another thing that you could look out for is high value orders. Be cautious of orders that have unusually high values, especially if they contain high ticket items or just seem out of the ordinary for the customer's typical purchasing behavior. Another thing to look out for chargebacks. As Cass mentioned, keep an eye out for instances where customers are reporting unauthorized charges to their banks because it's quite possible that they have saved their card details on their account. So when their accounts get taken over, the fraudster also has access to their credit cards. And when they have access to their credit cards, they're going to be making all of these unauthorized charges. And the customer, when that customer notices those charges, they will charge it back. They will dispute it with the bank. So this is another thing that we should look out for. Now, by analyzing and identifying these different scenarios, we have proactively detected account fraud. Now, let's discuss how to identify it, and move on to our next slide for tools and strategies that we can implement to effectively mitigate this risk. First thing, rule based fraud detection. Now, this is one of the key tools in our tool belt. rule-based fraud detection. By setting up just rules and parameters based on known fraud patterns and indicators, we can automatically flag and block suspicious activities in real time. Another thing that we can do is two factor authentication. Implementing two factor authentication is always going to add an extra layer of security by requiring users to provide two forms of identification before they're able to access their accounts. Now, this helps prevent unauthorized access even if login credentials have somehow been compromised. Another thing to do is transaction limits. By setting like limits on the number of orders that are allowed within a certain time frame, you can discourage abuse and prevent more fraudulent orders from affecting that original owner of the account. For example, you might set a daily limit to ensure that no more than 5 orders are placed within a 24-hour period. Another thing that can be done is an automated reset password email. So, anytime suspicious activity is detected, we can deploy an API service that springs into action, sending a reset password email to the account owner. Now, this not only secures the account, but also logs out all sessions at once, which would prevent further abuse. It's like changing the locks on your front door when you realize that you've lost your keys. Um, Another thing that you could do is email notifications for account changes. Just implementing email notification for account changes like email address changes, password updates. This will help the users to stay informed about any modifications that are being made to their accounts. This adds an extra layer of transparency and allows users to take immediate action if they think that there are some unauthorized changes to their account. Okay, so now that we've talked about account fraud, let's shift our focus to another critical aspect of fraud prevention: refund abuse. Refund abuse. Now, this is a fun topic. It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. It disguises itself as legitimate transactions. It occurs when individuals exploit refund policies seeking to gain financial advantage through deceptive means. So refund abuse, you can think of refund abuse as that friend who always shows up to the party, eats all the pizza, and then asks for a refund because they didn't like the toppings. So the trick is in identifying these actually cunning culprits. So let's delve into the art of detection and figure out the few key indicators that will help us unmask refund abuse. So the first thing that we have up here is order frequency. Now picture a sudden flurry of orders, followed by a barrage of refund requests. Now, this pattern of unusually high order frequency paired with frequent refund requests raises red flags and hints at potential abuse. Next up, we have refund rate. This is basically calculating the percentage of orders that results in refunds for each account. If certain accounts have significantly higher refund rates compared to the average, it is a signal that further investigation is needed, because it's not possible that this person just constantly keeps getting unlucky when the average people do not get that unlucky. So this disproportionate rate of refunds will indicate attempts to exploit our refund system. The third indicator that we could focus on is item complaints. Track item complaints reported by customers, such as missing items, incorrect orders. We can basically identify patterns of consistent complaints from the same accounts. If I, as a fraudster, if I know that I can get refunds for missing items, I am going to try and claim as a fraudster. I'm going to try and use the same technique until I'm blocked from actually being able to use that technique. So that pattern of consistent complaint from the same accounts is going to point to fraudulent behavior where individuals are deliberately exploiting our policies for their personal gain. Now that we've outsmarted the fraudsters with our detective skills, let's talk about how we're going to send them packing. So the first item here, my best friend, our best friend, rule-based fraud detection. Now think of this as a digital watchdog that is patrolling the virtual corridors of our platform. By implementing rule-based systems, we automatically flag transactions that meet certain predefined criteria as per your business appetite, enabling proactive intervention to stop fraud activity before it spirals out of control. The second thing that you could do is address verification. So, just like a lock secures a door, address verification is going to safeguard our refund policies. By validating customer addresses through third party services, you can actually create more barriers against misuse by individuals who are trying to use multiple different accounts to just get that first refund from you. The third item here is refund caps. Now imagine a safety net that is poised to catch excessive refund requests. Now, by setting limits on the number or value of refunds allowed within a certain time frame, we're not only discouraging abuse, but we're also sort of incentivizing responsible platform usage. Um, Another thing that could be done is collaboration with payment providers. We have to remember, in this fight against fraud, strength lies in unity. By forging alliances with payment providers and financial institutions, we're going to tap into a reservoir of expertise and resources. So basically, by joining forces with payment providers, we're not just fighting refund abuse, we're building a stronger, more resilient ecosystem that is going to prioritize integrity and trust. Uh, another suggestion that we have here is tiered refund policies. Now, picture a sliding scale of trust where loyal customers enjoy flexible refund terms, whereas the newcomers they navigate slightly stricter conditions. Through this tiered refund policies based on customer loyalty, their order history, we can strike a delicate balance between accommodating our trusted users and safeguarding against potential abuse. Okay, and I'm done with this. So now, without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton to my esteemed colleague, Beatrice, who will talk about promotion abuse.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gazelle. So yeah, as probably Cass mentioned earlier, when it comes to promotion abuse, it's not as impactful as the other abuses that we already mentioned. However, it will affect your marketing budget if it's not taken care of appropriately. I'm just gonna go straight to the next slide and explain a little bit more what type of promotion abuse we can look into. I guess the most common one will be referral vouchers, or in any case, whenever you are using a service and then you have this promotion of referring other friends, so you can get a discount or $5 or a benefit. Sometimes customers will pretend to be their friends, and then they will provide that referral code to a new account created by themselves. And this could be a cycle that customers can do every time. So in this case, for these type of situations, we will look into the account, and then if, for example, I refer myself, and then the other account has the same address like me, probably different email, probably different name, but the delivery address, or in this case, the address matches, the IP address matches too. So there might be like this type of self referral. On the other hand, there's the referral people who share their code in a website, which is a little bit harder to keep track. So in this case, it could be like a blog, or it could be on a YouTube channel, or any social media that it's open to the public. They can also share their referral code there, and it could be not an issue if like as an e-commerce you're okay with it, but sometimes that the amount of referrals that they get could be thousands, which is also like you might get money back, but at the same time be aware of there could be some customers taking advantage of this. So it depends also on your terms and conditions if this is like possible or not. If it's not an issue, so it shouldn't be bad. But if it's a part of your terms and conditions that they cannot share it in their in a social media or with other people outside of their group of friends, then yeah, it's an issue that you can look into it. Same thing. On the other hand, you also have to consider of those social media influencers that can also share that referral code in their websites or in their blogs, and then of course you will look into those customers, and you want them to keep promoting your business, right? So it's also important to determine what will be that level of risk that you're willing to take when it comes to the good customers that are bringing you business versus those customers that are just taking advantage of your service or your promotions. Speaking about other type of promotions, we also have voucher abuse, which is almost similar. Like in this case, every time that you have a discount or anything that you want people to come to you, either they will create new accounts to get the voucher if it's a one-time thing, or in this case, they will also happen to find like a voucher on Honey or any website that they shouldn't if you are not aware of it. So from one hand, like it's important to determine how are the codes being provided internally, and in this case it could be if you find those codes that they're not supposed to be outside yet, so that could be an internal issue that you have to look into it. Or on the other hand, there might be some old codes that they're no longer useful, but for some reason customers are still able to use them. So it's also important to detect those type of codes and make an action, like take an action really quick. And I guess the one that affect the most, it could be also gift card codes, because in this case, if the gift card it's like a high amount and people can take those codes very easily, it might affect your business. So in this case, for those type of gift card, as I mentioned with the voucher codes, same thing. Like understand it, like how the code is created and who has access to it, because it might be an internal type of fraud, or on the other hand, it just happened to be an old code that somebody found. So just to see how we are going to tackle them for these situations. So to try to reduce the amount of voucher or promotion abuse, of course, you want to make sure that the people who are using the codes are real people. So in this case, you can use the verification email or phone number. So this will be, you make sure that you are having a layer of protection when it comes to account creation. On the other hand, once they create the account, in this case, how are you making sure that they are sharing their code with the right people, or at least the people in their own city? So that's why we have geolocation tracking. So in this case, if I share my code with other people from other provinces, that might trigger something on their back end. So it's important to also look to make that comparison. But if you're okay with taking that risk, this shouldn't be a bigger issue. However, when it comes to very basic codes that you're sharing on outside, like for example, if you say like, oh yeah, gift card code like 1234, like those codes are very easy to spot if people are just randomly putting things on their account or even in the backend. So it's important to make sure that the codes that you're using are very unique, so it reduces the possibilities of people finding those codes and then taking advantage of them. Same thing with referrals. In this case, if you want to limit the amount of referrals, if you're okay with it, you can say like, hey, you know what, I'm just gonna give you the chance to refer 10 friends or 50 friends. But if you say like, yeah, you know what, like refer as many as you want, it's up to you. But it depends also like how much risk you're gonna take. Same thing with coupon redemptions. So if you say like, yeah, this customer is just gonna use this voucher one time, and then they should never use it again. So it's important to determine that. You can also look into with your legal team to determine what are the terms and conditions, or the marketing team as well. And same thing with voucher codes, making them more complicated. Yeah, if you just put like discount, so many people will find those ones very easily. So it's it's important to make sure to make it hard for them. And of course, when it comes to understanding the source of the referrals, as I mentioned earlier, like when it comes to social media influencers or people who has like a bigger audience that can share their code, it's important to establish those kind of customers. And if you want, you can allow them to get as many referrals as you want. And then on the other hand, the ones that you know that they are not that famous, you can limit that amount as well. So it can, like, as Gazal mentioned, like if you treat your customers better, like the ones that you know that are faithful, like, then yeah, you make sure that you're getting business, which is something that we're going to talk about with false positives. So yeah, what happened with false positives? So on the next slide, we're just going to mention what they are in general. So false positive in short terms is just legit or legitimate customers, where their actions might look suspicious, and they were blocked because they might have met certain criteria that you have already in your back end for fraud detection. However, the problem with the false positives is that this can create a negative experience with customers that they are good customers. They are faithful to you. They place a good amount of orders, or they have like good order history, but they just happen to have bad luck in some orders. So the problem with this is that they might go to your competitors, or they might just stop using the service. So this is why it's important to detect them. And so let's see how we are going to detect them. Awesome. So it's important to understand like three key things. From one hand, like customer support agents or contacts are the front line to tell you if a customer is having an issue or not with their account. So in this case, the good customers will try to know, hey, what's going on with my account, why I cannot place orders. So it's also important to determine who is taking a look into the account to define if they are saying probably the truth or not. So from one hand, yeah, customer support team, it's the first front line that can tell you about that. And also understanding the potential real life scenarios, it can like give you an idea that probably looks like a fraud criteria for you, but in my case, like it was not. So it's important to put yourself as a customer and see like, hey, what kind of activity might be just a bad luck thing, and what kind of activity might just be like, oh, you know what, yes, they're taking advantage of it. So yes, it's important to take that into consideration when creating your rules, when creating your backend criteria as to how to detect fraud. And also, like, yeah, in this case, when it comes to the criteria by itself, like if you already determine it, or the fraud team determine it, in this case, it's important to know like, hey, is this too strict, is this too vague? Because you can open it to say like, hey, I want like all the customers that only have 2 refunds, and that's it, I'm not going to give them more refunds. So that might be a little bit strict for some people, but if you're okay of taking care of not letting anybody else take their refunds, so there might be potential backlash in social media or like publicly, because customers might come and start complaining about the company being too strict. So it's important to take that risk of probably, yes, you might affect some good customers if it's too big, but at the same time, if it's too open or too strict, you might also not be able to catch everybody. So it's a little bit of both. So it's that part that yeah, you have to consider that there's still going to be a lot of bad actors taking advantage of the system, but at the same time, there's still good people that might look like bad. So it's important to take that into consideration. So how can we like help these people? So in this case, like what we can do with these customers, of course, like if you decide like, you know what, yeah, I'm gonna let them place orders again, or keep being a good customer. So it's, you can take into consideration their order history, in this case, how often they order with you, or how often, or probably they even though probably they don't order very often, but the value of the order is very high. So it's important to also determine like what type of loyal customers you want to get. And of course, like you want to do the analysis in the back end to see if there's other type of customers having the same issue, or what's the issue like in the bigger scale. Because if it's just 1 or 2 situations, like you might be taking like not a very low risk. So it's just like, okay, yeah, it's not a big issue. But if it's an issue that is affecting a lot of people, then you will have to make some changes on your back end. And of course, determining the root cause of the issue, because it could be also an internal, like a process issue. In this case, there might be some policies that is affecting the customer in the whole process, but at the same time, it might just be something that you can change in the back end, just making the criteria a little bit more lighter, or in this case, more open for people. So it's important to look into those situations. So it's different steps. I cannot tell you like a step by step because each company is different. So, but at least it's important to understand that this could help you in the long run. But yeah, in general, I think we covered the majority of the things that when it comes to fraud, and it's also a lot that we can show. But like for the sake of time, we're just just a small conclusion that Gasal is gonna share with you.
Thank you, B, for shedding light on the intricacies of promotion abuse, false positives. Damn. Okay, so now as we wrap up today's presentation, let's take a moment to reflect on the broader landscape of fraud detection and prevention. Fraud detection is not just about identifying individual instances of abuse, it's about uncovering these broader trends and patterns that can inform proactive measures to safeguard our platform and our users. And as we know, fraudsters are evolving their tactics, making it crucial for us to stay ahead of the curve. And how do we do that? Good old data analytics. So that's on our next slide. Um, Basically, this approach begins with the wealth of data that you have at your disposal. We're talking about transactional data, customer behavior patterns, and historical trends, which are the building blocks of our fraud detection strategy. When we analyze transactional data, we need to know we're not just crunching numbers, we are uncovering insights that reveal intricate details about customer behavior, from the frequency of orders to the timing and to the geographical locations and device types that are used for each login. Like every piece of this data is going to tell you a story. But the next point is where it really gets interesting. By scrutinizing this data, we can actually pinpoint anomalies, those subtle irregularities that might indicate fraudulent activity. Now imagine this. Your data analytics platform alerts you to a sudden surge in orders from a specific geographic location, but all of them are originating from new devices and new IP addresses. While this could be a sign of legitimate growth, it could also signal a coordinated fraud attempt. So, this is where your adaptive measures come into play, which brings me to my last point here. So, to combat fraud, we need to be proactive and implement a range of adaptive measures, be it rule based fraud detection algorithms to enhanced authentication protocols, implementing transaction limits and thresholds. Like these measures are designed to evolve alongside emerging fraud trends that will ensure that we're always one step ahead of this game. Um, so, as we continue our journey in this fight against fraud, let's remember the power of data analytics. By harnessing the insights hidden within our data, we can actually get a lot of information about fraud trends, adapt preemptive measures, and ultimately safeguard our platform and customers. Finally, I would like to thank you all for your attention and patience with us today. And yes, let's continue working together to build a trusted community for our users. Yes, the floor is now open for any questions.
Oh, okay. It's letting me join you guys on stage as well, which is perfect. So looks like we have quite a few questions coming in. That was such an informative presentation, but all three of you really broke it down to be really easy to understand. So that was great. The most popular question so far is for somebody wanting to pursue fraud management as a career, what academic training or certifications should they complete? So I think we have a few students in the audience here.
So I can try to take this one. I would say that all three of us come from very different backgrounds, so I don't think that there is like one specific path that you need to take to try to get into fraud. I think that it's a space that people who really like dealing with like edge cases and data find themselves working in. But if you're interested in like getting specific training certifications, I know that the MRC, the Merchant Risk Council, offers a bunch of different training courses that you can become a certified, payment fraud professional, I think is one of them. They have a couple of different certifications if that is probably something that would boost your resume and help you to have a bit of an edge against other folks. I don't know if Beatrice or Ghazal have anything to add.
No, it's I think yeah, from one hand, like I just got here because I applied for the for the fraud team, and I just happen to have like an analytical mindset. So I guess it's more about like think in that part of a logical way of doing things and the analytical part and analytics. Sorry, I think that's very helpful in any type of position, but definitely for fraud, everybody's looking for data analysts. So from one hand, yes, it's important to see the fraud patterns in a very big scale, but also do more manual work. It's just asking questions for yourself, like what is normal, what is not normal, and then just move from there.
The Association of Certified Fraud Examiners generally has a few certifications that might be helpful if you're trying to get into the fraud market, into the fraud game. I think for data analysis, honestly, you do not have to be a SQL expert or there are a lot of roles that do a lot of analysis without that actual title. So I would really just focus on looking at patterns. So it does not matter what tools you use for it. You do not have to, as a matter of fact, be a master at SQL to be a data analyst. You could just actually do a lot of your analysis in Excel and Google Sheets. And I know a lot of analysts who would hate me for saying this, but it is a fact. A lot of data analysis can just be done by looking at data and trying to find trends and patterns, because that's what, at the end of the day, it is about. And it does not really matter what specific tool you're using.
Yes, all great advice. Sounds like there's many different ways you can stream into sort of fraud without just having data background. So thanks for sharing all three perspectives there. Going back to all three of you again, people, I think they're looking for some horror stories. So what is one of the most crazy fraud abuse scenarios you've run into, or any really fun stories that you've come across that you can share with us?
So I really like this story because it is very related to, I guess, like definitely like a life hack type scenario. But a couple of years ago, we were updating our gift card system from being an in-house built thing to being a third-party integration. And at some point in time, when we made this change, I guess that the way that we were validating our gift card codes changed. And what ended up happening is our backend team was doing like a fuzzy match to find the gift card code to redeem it. And I guess just random fraudsters out there found out that they could type in any letter, and if it fuzzy matched a code and it was unique, it would redeem the code. And so like our codes are 16 digits long. You're supposed to type in all 16 digits to redeem the code. And we had people typing in 4 digits, then like, I don't know, ABC. And then we had somehow in our entire database, only one code that started with ABC and it would redeem that. And I thought that that was like such a interesting way that these people just found something that worked. And we like looked into it. We're like, oh, wow, this is a problem. How long has this been in place for? So that's fixed. You can't do that anymore. But it was a quite confusing time when we were like seeing like, I don't know, 6-year-old gift card codes get redeemed all of a sudden. It was quite interesting.
Thanks for sharing.
I guess for me, like just really quick, it's credit card fraud in general. It's crazy how very fast and like they create accounts like this, like seconds in seconds. Like they just create account, place orders, and it's a whole system. And like I know there's some fraud people here with me from the team that we know Tony. Pretty much we call it Tony because like they use that name in all the accounts that they created. So that person, like we know it was a whole organization. It was a criminal organization. Like it was coming from a different country, but at the same time, like it was at some point we will have to do a manual like block because we know that we're creating accounts and then we just block each account at that moment. So it was like a fun time at that time. It was a very manual process, but at the same time, it was just like for us, it was the first time that we discovered like a very big network of people taking advantage of like, yeah, like credit card in general. So it was fun.
Okay. Those are both very interesting examples, and I like how they're so different. Another question is, how should a company measure the ROI of investing in fraud management teams and tools?
So I can try to cover this one. I recently did a project where we changed how we were using 3DS, and a large part of that is I did a cost analysis on, I guess, the amount that it was costing us to use the tool versus what we would have been paying for. We reduced our usage. I think that's important context. So like how much it was costing us to currently use it compared to how much fraud we would have been getting if it hadn't have been in place. So I think that it's very important to be able to measure what the cost of fraud is. And I guess when you're considering the cost, there's both like the actual cost of the fraud, the fee that you're paying per chargeback, the cost associated with the manual labor of catching the people doing the fraud, the impact to like your customer care teams that are having to deal with the people talking to them, on top of the risk of friction and like turning new customers, because a lot of these measures target new customers, and obviously you want to be very careful about the friction you put on when you're trying to convince someone to start using your business. But I do think that it is very important to measure the costs of using things versus those things, and like the added benefits of the reputation that you get for having less fraud. Like, I don't know, I feel like customers care about making sure that they're storing their card information somewhere that's safe. So I don't know if that fully answers the question, or if anyone else has things to add.
I definitely think that does. I mean, you put out a good point that it's a cost benefit analysis. So whether or not the program you're using costs more than what you're saving, but also looking at the customer sentiment. So it's not just numbers as far as like financially that you're measuring it, but also the impact you're having on your customer's experience. I think that's a really good point, because it's so easy to just look at numbers super analytically and see if that balances out. But if it's costing you a little more, but it's saving you in reputation, probably worth it. Awesome. And then I think this question came in quite early, but so Cassandra, I think it was during your part where they were asking, are there any third-party tools you would personally recommend? So I think that was with the first section that you went over.
Yeah, I purposely kept it vague because I don't know if I'm allowed to disclose which specific software that we're using. But to be more specific about some that I really find really cool, and this isn't one that Skip is using, so I feel okay saying this, but I've been watching Incognia quite a bit, and they're a data enrichment platform, and they have like really cool capabilities to like track devices, and they can tell when someone is like doing a factory reset on their phone to replace the device information, or if they're using some sort of app to pretend their device ID is something else, and they have like super cool abilities to pinpoint the exact geolocation to like the specific apartment in an apartment building, which I think would have a lot of like capabilities for trying to like prevent against some of this refund abuse. So they're definitely someone on my watch list.
Very cool. Thanks for the suggestion. I know we're a little bit past 1 o'clock, so we're gonna sort of wrap up this part of the presentation and transport everybody back to the networking floor. So thank you so much, Cassandra, Beatrice, and Ghazal. That was such an awesome presentation. I hope everybody who was here today found it insightful and learned something. Like I mentioned, we're gonna end the presentation. It is all recorded, so I will send you out the link to you once I have it up on YouTube. Feel free to share it with any colleagues or friends who couldn't join us today. And there is an entire playlist of all our past Tech Mesh ups. So if you wanted to see some other interesting conversations and topics that we've gone over, those are all up there. So thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully I'll see you at some of our future events.